I still remember the day my father, Michael Carter, sat me down and told me he had met someone special. I was only 8 years old at the time, young, but old enough to understand that everything was about to change. For my entire life, it had just been me and my dad, the most important man in my world, the one who had raised me after my biological mother left. Lillian, the woman who gave birth to me, disappeared before I was old enough to form a single real memory of her. No calls, no birthday cards, no letters. She simply vanished. For years, I thought it was my fault, that I had done something wrong, that I wasn't good enough to make her stay. But then I realized the truth. Some people give birth, but that doesn't make them parents. My father never let me feel abandoned. He worked long hours to provide for me, but he was still present for every milestone. First day of school, parent-teacher meetings, late nights when I cried over bullies or bad grades. He was my everything. So when he introduced me to Vanessa, I tried to keep an open mind. "Emma, sweetheart, I want you to meet someone special," my dad said, his voice full of hope. Vanessa walked in with a bright, flawless smile. She crouched down to my level, her eyes sparkling with warmth. "It's so nice to finally meet you, Emma. Your dad talks about you all the time. I can't wait to be part of your family." I forced a polite smile. But even at that moment, something about her felt off. At first, Vanessa seemed like a dream. She was sweet, affectionate, always making sure my dad was happy, but only when he was around. When he wasn't, I became invisible. She never yelled at me or treated me cruelly, but she also never truly cared about me. It was subtle, the way she would overlook me in conversations, the way she would forget to ask if I wanted anything when she brought home takeout, the way she would only act like a loving stepmother when my father was watching. I tried telling my dad. "You don't like her because she's not your real mom, sweetheart," he said with a sigh. "Give it time. Having a mother figure is a good thing." But she wasn't my mother. She never would be. Still, I endured it, because I saw how happy my father was. Then Vanessa got pregnant, and that's when I realized I was no longer part of this family. When Lily was born, Vanessa changed completely. She had always been distant, but now she was openly dismissive. Lily was her real daughter, her priority, while I was just the stepchild, the obligation. The difference was impossible to ignore. Vanessa no longer pretended to care about me. She focused entirely on Lily. My presence in the house became secondary, unimportant, invisible. At first, it was small things. Family outings? I was too old to be included. Birthday presents? Lily got everything she wanted, while I received something generic, barely wrapped. Dinner conversations? I faded into the background, while Vanessa gushed over Lily's every little accomplishment. I had always felt like an outsider, but now it was undeniable. I didn't belong. But I didn't care. I was growing up, planning for college, dreaming about the life I would build for myself, far away from them. And then, I met Daniel. He was the kindest, most patient person I had ever known. He made me feel seen in a way Vanessa never did. When he proposed, I knew without a doubt that he was my future. My father was ecstatic. He hugged me, his eyes filled with pride. "I can't believe my little girl is getting married," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I wouldn't miss this for the world," I believed him. But Vanessa? She smiled. She nodded. She pretended to be happy for me. But deep down, I should have known. She was planning something. The morning of my wedding, everything was perfect. I had spent months planning every detail. The dress, the venue, the flowers. But most of all, I had dreamed of the moment when my father would walk me down the aisle. He had been there for every important milestone in my life. There was no one else I wanted by my side. Then, my phone rang. I saw my father's name on the screen and felt instant relief. Until I answered. "Emma, sweetheart, I'm so sorry. Lily is missing. Vanessa and I are looking everywhere for her." The world tilted. "Missing? How?" I gasped, my heart pounding. She never came home from school. We're searching everywhere, my father said, his voice filled with panic. We've called the police. I felt sick. This couldn't be happening. Not today. Dad, please find her. I will, I promise. Just wait an hour for me, okay? If I'm not back, go ahead with the wedding. An hour, 60 minutes. I sat there, in my wedding dress, my hands trembling, my heart racing, watching the door, waiting for my father to arrive. He'll come, Emma, Daniel whispered, squeezing my hand. He wouldn't miss this. But when the clock hit 1 hour and 1 minute, I knew. He wasn't coming. I felt a lump rise in my throat, but I had no choice. I took a deep breath, forced a smile, and walked down the aisle alone. The ceremony passed in a blur. I said my vows, smiled for the photos, thanked the guests, but it wasn't the wedding I had imagined. The entire time, one thought repeated in my head. Where was my father? Then, minutes after the ceremony ended, my phone buzzed. It was my dad. We found her! We're on our way! Relief flooded me, until they arrived at the reception. I expected to see a crying, terrified 6-year-old in my father's arms. Instead, Lily was happily munching on a cookie, smiling like nothing had happened. I knelt down in front of her, my voice soft. Sweetheart, where did you go? She giggled. Mommy told me to go home with Ryan's mom, but she said not to tell anyone. The blood drained from my face. I turned slowly toward Vanessa. She froze. And in that moment, I knew. She had planned this. She had deliberately lied to my father, tricked him into missing my wedding, and stolen something from me that I could never get back. And for that, I would never forgive her. I had always known Vanessa was selfish, but I never thought she was cruel. Yet, standing there at my own wedding reception, staring at my beaming 6-year-old sister, I realized just how deep Vanessa's manipulation ran. Mommy told me to go home with Ryan's mom, but she said not to tell anyone. Lily had no idea what she had just revealed. The words hung in the air like a bomb, ticking down to an inevitable explosion. I turned my head slowly toward Vanessa. She was frozen, too still, too quiet. My father, standing next to her, frowned. Vanessa? His voice was low, dangerous. He flinched. Emma, sweetheart, this is all just a misunderstanding. No, I cut her off. My voice was shaking, but not from sadness, from rage. Tell me the truth, Vanessa. Did you know where Lily was the whole time? Her eyes darted toward my father, panic creeping in. I could see it. The desperate calculations happening behind her eyes. The realization that she was trapped. Michael, let's talk about this later. No, my father snapped, his face turning red. We talk about it now. The entire reception had gone dead silent. Guests were watching. My in-laws, my friends, even the catering staff. Everyone had picked up on the tension. Vanessa's hands trembled slightly. Lily is fine, she tried, her voice softer, pleading. Let's not ruin Emma's big day over a simple mistake. A simple mistake? I laughed. A short, sharp, humorless laugh. You tricked my dad into missing my wedding, and now you're telling me not to ruin my own day? My father's face twisted in disbelief. Is that true, Vanessa? Did you do this on purpose? She didn't answer. Not right away. And that hesitation was all I needed to see. I felt the ground shift beneath me. For years, I had put up with her indifference, her favoritism, her quiet cruelty. I had endured it because I wanted my father to be happy. But this was something I wouldn't forgive. I turned back to Lily, kneeling in front of her. I forced my voice to be gentle, even though my hands were shaking. Sweetheart, can you tell Daddy what you told me? Lily, innocent and unknowing, repeated it. Mommy told me to go with Ryan's mom, but she said not to tell anyone. My father staggered back, like he had been punched. His face had gone pale. Vanessa, he whispered, tell me this isn't true. She opened her mouth, closed it. Then she cracked. I just wanted our first wedding to be Lily's. A collective gasp swept through the room. I felt my stomach drop. What? My father's voice was hoarse, barely a whisper. Vanessa's face was red now, her eyes glassy with unshed tears. I thought you only cared about Emma! Her voice rose, shaking with emotion. You've given her everything, your time, your attention. What about Lily? What about our daughter? I just wanted her to have something too. My fingers curled into fists at my sides. So you stole my wedding from me? My voice was cold now, unforgiving. I didn't mean to. You did. I cut her off. You planned this. You told Lily to leave so Dad would go searching for her. You knew exactly what you were doing. She flinched at my words. But she didn't deny it. She just stood there, breathing hard, tears streaming down her face, waiting for someone to feel sorry for her. Not this time. I turned to my father. Now you see her for who she really is. He said nothing. But the betrayal on his face spoke volumes. The reception was ruined. Guests whispered in hushed voices, their eyes darting between me, my father, and Vanessa. My new husband, Daniel, stood beside me, his hand on my back, steadying me. But I barely felt it. All I could focus on was my father's silence. He didn't yell. He didn't argue. He just stared at Vanessa like he had never seen her before. You let me believe my daughter was missing, he finally said, his voice eerily calm. Do you have any idea what that did to me? Vanessa sniffled, her hands clasped together. I was scared, Michael. You were scared? My father's voice sharpened. Number Emma was scared. I was scared. We thought something had happened to Lily. And you? You sat there and watched us suffer while you knew exactly where she was. Vanessa shook her head frantically. Michael, I was just trying to… Trying to what? My father's tone darkened. I had never seen him like this before. Trying to teach me a lesson? Trying to punish Emma for existing? He took a deep breath, his hands shaking at his sides. You stole something from us, Vanessa. From me. From Emma. You stole a moment I can never get back. Her lower lip trembled. But Michael, she always… Don't. The single word was like a slap. She froze. You don't get to blame Emma, he said, his voice raw. She is my daughter. I raised her. I was there for her when her mother left, and today, on the most important day of her life, I should have been there. But you… He shook his head. You took that from me. Tears burned in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Vanessa reached for his hand. Michael, please, don't touch me. His voice was like ice. I had never seen my father look at anyone the way he looked at her now. Like she was the biggest mistake he had ever made. Vanessa's chest rose and fell rapidly. She looked around at the guests, at Lily, at me, as if searching for someone to take her side. But no one did. Even Lily, her own daughter, was frowning. Mommy, she said softly, why did you do that? Vanessa flinched like she had been struck. For once, she had no answer, no excuse, nothing. I stepped forward, my voice steady but cold as steel. I tolerated you for years, Vanessa. I stayed quiet for Dad's sake. I let you ignore me, dismiss me, treat me like I was nothing. But this? This was the last straw. She looked at me, eyes desperate. Emma, you were just ruining my wedding. I took a deep breath, staring directly into her eyes. And now, I never want to see you again. Her breath hitched. Michael. She turned back to my father, pleading now. You're not going to let her talk to me like this, are you? My father's expression didn't change. Leave, Vanessa. Her face crumpled. Michael, please. Leave. His voice was final. This time, she didn't argue. She just turned, humiliated, and walked out of the reception hall. I watched as the doors closed behind her. And just like that, she was gone. Vanessa tried to pretend nothing had happened the next day. Like she hadn't ruined my wedding. Like she hadn't manipulated my father into missing one of the biggest moments of my life. like she hadn't been exposed in front of everyone. She showed up at our Thanksgiving lunch as if she still belonged, as if she hadn't been told to leave the night before. She smiled too much. She acted overly helpful, filling drinks, passing dishes, chatting like she was the perfect hostess. But no one played along. My father was silent. He barely looked at her. His movements were stiff, his jaw clenched, his eyes dark with disappointment. Daniel sat beside me, his fingers lightly tapping against his knee. He leaned over and whispered, "She's acting like she didn't just get kicked out last night." "I know," I muttered, gripping my fork so tightly my knuckles turned white. Because while Vanessa might have been pretending everything was fine, I knew the truth. She wasn't sorry. Not once had she pulled me aside to apologize. Not once had she said, "Emma, I was wrong. I hurt you." Instead, she swept it under the rug, as if I was supposed to move on, as if she hadn't destroyed something I could never get back. But then she made a mistake. Halfway through lunch, as she reached for the breadbasket, she glanced at me and smiled. "Emma, sweetheart, pass me the butter. You know, I've always thought of you as my daughter." Everything inside me went still. I set my fork down slowly. The air in the room shifted. Daniel tensed beside me. My father finally looked up. I let the silence stretch. Let her think I was going to play along. Then I shattered it. "Don't call me that." Vanessa blinked. "What?" I pushed my chair back and stood. "Don't call me your daughter," I said, my voice cold as ice. "You lost that right when you ruined my wedding." Her face paled. "Emma." "No." My tone was sharper now. "You had one job, Vanessa. Just one. To respect that my father and I had a bond that existed long before you. But you couldn't handle that, could you?" Her eyes filled with tears. Fake tears. "I made a mistake," she whispered. "I was just trying to—" "No, you weren't," I cut her off. "You weren't trying to do what's best for the family. You weren't thinking about Lily. You weren't thinking about my father. You were thinking about yourself. And now, you have to live with the consequences." Vanessa turned to my father, desperate now. "Michael, please." His expression didn't change. "You need to leave." Her breath hitched. What? He placed his napkin on the table and looked at her, his face unreadable. "I spent the entire night thinking about what you did," he said, his voice heavy with exhaustion. "And the truth is, I don't know if I can ever look at you the same way again." Vanessa shook her head, her voice rising. "Michael, you're being dramatic. I was just—" "No," he cut her off. His voice was sharp, final. "You were being selfish, and now you need to go." She looked around the table, searching for support, but there was none. Even Lily, her own daughter, was staring at her, confused. Vanessa took a shaky breath. "You're choosing her over me?" My father's face hardened. "I'm choosing the truth." And in that moment, she finally understood. She had lost. She grabbed her purse, her face red with humiliation, and stormed out the front door. I exhaled, my entire body trembling. It was over. Finally, my father sat back down, rubbing his temples. He looked exhausted. "Dad?" I said softly. "Are you okay?" He let out a hollow laugh. "Number, but I will be." For the first time in years, he saw Vanessa for who she really was. And for the first time in my life, I felt free. Vanessa and my father separated within a week. At first, she tried to fight it, tried to gaslight him into thinking he was overreacting. But there was no fixing what she had broken. She tried to reach out to me multiple times. I ignored every single call. I wasn't interested in her excuses. The only thing I regretted was how it affected Lily. She was innocent in all of this. My father and I worked hard to make sure she knew she was still loved. But Vanessa? She was no longer a part of my life. She never would be again. And that, I realized, was the best gift she had ever given me. Freedom. Would you have forgiven Vanessa? Do you think my father did the right thing? Have you ever had to cut someone toxic out of your life? Let me know in the comments.